before the break, we're going to be talking about the women's basketball team who they've strung together. They're on a 3-game losing streak, but those games have come down to literally final possessions. When you combine the margin of loss in all 3 games, it is literally 7 points. So they have been real close. They're really close to be sitting at 6-0 in American Athletic Conference play. But one of the biggest struggles for them has been offense, and it's something that reared its ugly head against SMU. In particular, this time it was towards the end of the first half and into the third quarter. There was a stretch there where they had built not a sizable cushion between them and SMU, but they had a pretty decent lead, and they were really struggling on offense. It seemed like they were stuck around the 26-28 mark for a good chunk, and that allowed SMU to rally and kind of have the upper hand the rest of the way. Dan, what have you seen from the Houston Cougars women's basketball team and in regards to those offensive struggles? Because like we mentioned in last week's show, defensively, they are towards the top, not just in the conference, but the top of the country, because they're holding opponents, the teams like 99 out under 60 points. It's just about being able to put the ball through the basket as well themselves.
Yeah, and they've been doing such a good job in different areas and when they struggle. But it's kind of been the story of their season. You go through all of their games, they all lost with most of their losses come within a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 come down to the wire. And I think one thing that this team is still learning is how to win. Coach Sampson referenced how his team knows how to win games. I think that's something this team doesn't just have yet, and it really has come down to shot making. And often, if you look at their starting lineup, it's really only one player that can go beat their defender off the dribble. Everything else would have to come within the confines of the system as far as ball movement or a screen or something like that. And I think that hurts them a lot, because when they bring Tierra off the bench, then they have 2 players who can break down the defense and create for others, or even create for themselves and have a shot maker and a shot creator. And so I think that hurts them a lot. And oftentimes some of their role players just don't knock down wide open shots. And it's a make or miss game. I think against SMU, Layla really struggled with making shots. She got such a good looks and such a shots that you want her to take, and she practiced, and I know she knows she can make it. They just didn't fall. And it's a la Houston against Temple. And so for them, it's just kind of, I guess, staying the course, because they can put a stretch together like they did to start these 3-game start conference when they went on a 3-game losing streak. Then over this last stretch offensively, they just struggled. They stopped turning the ball over. Their turnovers went down, but it's just been shot making. And I think they really rely on Tierra Young so much, particularly in the half court, because she's one of the only players that can beat her person off the dribble in an isolation situation or even on a pick and roll. I mean, she's most of the time a matchup nightmare, because her mid-range is so good and she can get to the rim and finish so strong. I think that's the next step for Layla, is becoming a better 2-point scorer. She can really shoot the 3 well, but I think she needs to become a better 2-point scorer, and that can help take her game to another level, because too often, just like early in Marcus's career, when he wasn't making the 3, he wasn't really being effective. And she's kind of like that, but has a talent and should become a better 2-point scorer. And they really need Bria to score as well. I think that's another person who they need her to score consistently.
Yeah, that's a great point. Obviously, you brought up Tierra Young. She was one of the players that didn't have an offensive struggle against SMU. She actually had a career day with her 24 points. But I'm curious to get back to something you mentioned about Tierra Young. Right now, she's coming off the bench. She's playing starter minutes. She's playing 30-plus minutes. But when you mentioned when she's on the floor at the same time with Layla Blair, do you think she should just be a starter? What do you mean in terms of whenever she's on the same floor with Layla Blair? Sometimes that'll be a struggle because they have 2 players that can create on offense.
No, it's not a struggle when they're on the floor together. I think it's a struggle when Tierra isn't on the floor and Layla's on the floor with Cam Jones, Tatiana Hill, Bria Patterson, Brittany, because none of those other 4s outside of Layla can really beat their opponents off the dribble. I think Bria can do that. I've seen her do that, but that isn't her forte. But she definitely has the capability to do that. So their offensive struggles because everything has to come off action to get a good look at the basket, or put it in Layla's hands going against a set defense where defense often collapse on her and force her to give up the ball or take a tough shot. And so when Tierra's on the floor, I think it really makes them a better offensive team because they have two players now that not only can beat their player off the dribble, but when they do that, it often causes help and they can create open shots for Brittany, who is a knockdown standstill shooter, or Bria, who can make open shots. And Tatiana, she has to be more consistent offensively when she gets her touches on the block. She affects the game and does a good job rebounding and defensively, but offensively, when she gets good looks, she has to capitalize. But that's what I mean offensively. I like. I mean, when I'm watching the games, they say Tierra prefers to come off the bench, and I don't mind that. Like you mentioned, she's playing starter minutes, just like we've seen Temple. Their two top scorers and best players come off the bench, and if that's the better for the team, then so be it. I mean, she still impacts the game. I think there's been times in this season where the team has gotten off to such a slow start that maybe she should have started some of those games or been inserted faster to not allow Houston to get off such a slow start. And then they're playing catch up. And so it kind of has its gifts and its curse. But I mean, when she's on the floor, her and Layla, they're at their best as a team.
Oh, one of the things you just said, a gift and a curse. Now, we know when it comes to Ron Huey, kind of an identity that he's established at Houston over the last few seasons is running that full court press throughout the entire game. Now, it's something it's SMU that it's one of the big reasons why just over the season they're causing opponents to turn the ball over frequently and often. But do you think that could potentially be affecting them on offense just in terms of the players being tired when it comes to the third quarter into the fourth, because they do have to full court press for an entire game, and that's something that catches up with you throughout the course of the game?
I think it could, but I would say no, because they've done a better job of taking care of the basketball. And that's one thing they really, really struggle with. They got their turnovers down. It was in 20 and 15. Now they're down to 8, 9, 10. And that's a really good thing. And so although when you're fatigued, sometimes it's your legs. So it can't play in part, but Coach Huey does an awesome job of not – sometimes he switches into a token press where it's not so much of a full court press with pressing you the entire game. They may be full court, but it isn't a full court trap where they're scrambling. Everyone's kind of racing. If the ball gets there, Howard playing catch up. So sometimes it's just a token press to make you take time off the shot clock to come down to just to disrupt your flow and make you execute in a short amount of time. And so they do a good job of switching that up and giving teams a different look at different presses. And so I don't think as much. I think the team's probably in well shape. I'm sure they put in a ton of work and prepared themselves. So I'm not going to give them that excuse. I think the defense only helps and aids their team because they're still turning teams over at a high margin. They still they need to get more points off of those turnovers in fast break opportunities. I think that's another thing that they can do well. But offensively, I don't really think that has an impact. It could if they get fatigued, but I don't think they are. I got to put the work that they put in. I got to give them the credit for putting that work in and trust that they put it with.
Up next for the Houston Cougars women's basketball team on Wednesday, they'll be playing Cincinnati. They'll be traveling up to play Cincinnati, a winless Bearcats team in conference, and then they'll wrap up their week against Tulane, who they beat earlier in the conference schedule. Down any final takeaways in regards to the women's basketball team, or anything that you'll be keeping an eye on when it comes to those two games?
No, I think they got to go on a 3-game win streak here. They got to take care of business at Cincinnati. Then they got a tough Tulane team who's coming off a win against Tulsa, who is undefeated in conference play at home, and they already beat Tulane in New Orleans. So they got to take care of business there. And then they get a Memphis team who they can handle. So I think they got to take care of business against Cincinnati, get off the snide, come back home, and take care of business against a good Tulane team. But I mean, no need to panic. This team can, I don't want to say easily, but as you watch them, they can definitely compete in the conference tournament to win it. I mean, there are only a handful of good teams in this conference that you put them on the floor, you can be like, dang, Houston's better than them, but why aren't they winning? It's just different little tidbits that keep them for having a successful season and winning some of these close games.
Houston sits 6-13 overall. They're 3-3 in conference. Like I said, Wednesday's game will be at Cincinnati. Houston is 1-7 on the road, so it'll be a tough test for them nonetheless. And Leon, like you said, it is a point where it's a must-win game, especially in regards to where Cincinnati is towards the bottom of the conference. But at this point, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, it's all about being able to continue and improve, obviously, but they have to be able to hit their stride come March because they're getting to a point where they have to win the American Athletic Conference postseason tournament to make it to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think they could still probably win the conference outright, but at this point, I don't know if that'll be enough to get them in the tournament. I think they have to put their full focus on continue to hit their stride and preparing for the American Athletic Conference tournament, in which, like I said, they can really be a favorite to win it. I think outside Florida be a favorite, but they lost to Tulsa. I think they can beat Tulsa. They're a better team than Tulsa. They can beat Tulane. They can pretty much beat anybody else in this conference on their best day. They just gotta put it all together. And they played really well last year in the American Athletic Conference. So I'm expecting them to focus in and continue to get better. I mean, because they have it all there. They lost so many close games. They just got to learn from their mistakes and not continue to make some of the same mistakes in games.